All right. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Mindset Talk, where we try to get into the mind of a top producer in real estate or in business. So today I'm very excited because I have someone here that has had an amazing track record of results wherever she has gone. From a solo agent to running a team that expanded over 23 states to growing her Play Bigger consulting company. She has proven to have had an impact in whichever direction she's gone. So I'm lucky enough to have personally worked with her, and something I've always valued when talking with her is because she's had such a vast track record. It's not just in real estate, and she's able to see things differently and apply her experience from both inside and outside the industry to help the people she works with. So I've always valued that. With that being said, I'm very excited to welcome Raquel Quinnett.
It's such an honor. Thank you, Robert, for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks for being here. So we have a lot to talk about, so let's jump right in. Would you take a minute to just give us, the cliff notes of your time in real estate and in business and, what market you're currently in now?
Well, I've been in the industry for over 2 decades, so let's try to do as short as possible when it comes to cliff notes. I started in 1999 at the age of 19. I started in real estate. I got my real estate license actually to not do real estate sales, but to be an investor. And quickly I realized when you pass the test, every broker in town calls you. And so I basically fell in love. Got my feet wet into the brokerage world and fell in love with real estate sales. I started investing probably a year later in out of state. And then it's actually when I started to hire and build a team in my second year in the business. 5 years later, I went ahead and opened up a mortgage company because we had a team that was rocking and rolling. I ended up opening a mortgage company. And then I was actually recruited to the corporate world of real estate. So since I was investing in Nevada and in Arizona, that's how I landed in Arizona, is I was recruited to be the CEO and a team leader of a Keller Williams office here in town at the age of 26. And so in the worst time possible, if many of you guys have been there, it was the worst recession that I think real estate has ever seen. It was from 2007 to 2010. And then I had my second child. So I took some time back from corporate and just, did the stay-at-home mom, but that didn't last for very long. And then I thought, you know what, I want to start selling again. So what I did is I ended up building a real estate business in the state of Arizona, not knowing a soul, not having anybody here, not having a database. And then a year later, we did 253 homes as a solo agent. So I will definitely dive into that. And then that's when I started to basically expand my locations into the Valley. So I had four expansion teams here in Arizona. And then I went into Nevada, California, and then the 23 locations throughout the country.
Wow.
But awesome. From there, yeah. So that's like majority of it in real estate.
Wow. So there's a lot to uncover there and unpack. So you started investing. That's how you got into it initially. Mm-hmm. And then you said year 2, you went to team?
I went to assistant because I was in college and people said that, and I was doing it part-time. So they said that I couldn't do real estate. We all know how it is. Like clients want to work whenever you don't want to work or when it's the most least convenient for you. Sure. So then I had agents and an assistant that I actually hired.
Cool. Awesome. So were you selling solo for a period of time then as well? Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. Yeah. And then you started your team, grew, and then you went back and restarted a solo career where you did 250 or so later on, right? Okay, cool. Just want to make sure I had that right. So if we go back to the beginning from your time as a solo agent, how did you get in either of the platforms, because you kind of restarted your business later in life, in either of those startup scenarios, how did you get traction? Like, what did you do in those early years to get momentum?
Yeah, I think in California, in the Bay Area, when I first started, I didn't know what I didn't know. And I say I started my real estate career because I had no idea what a business was at that time. You just don't understand it. So I had a lot of family that were living in the Bay Area, but believe it or not, no one had trusted me because I just had gotten my license and they thought I was too young, too new in the business to actually sell their house. So I had to look for other options. And when I looked at our office that I started with, it was ERA at the time, and now it's in Intero, is I looked at the top producers. What were they doing? So they were farming, they were doing open houses, they were on floor time back in the days, um, from sign calls and magazines. So I was like, okay, how do I get to do that? So I basically did open houses and I started a buyer business for a very long time. I didn't do any sellers because I was so nervous to even do a listing. And I did other people's open houses because I didn't have open houses. So I was that kid that was like, do you have an open house? Do you have a listing that I can sit on? Can I go with you and set up your signs? And then I basically started doing farming shortly after.
Okay. So you were hustling. It's like whatever was out there.
Whatever was going to work.
Yeah. So you were talking to people that had done it, which I feel is so important in whatever you're trying to do. And then you actually applied that. You weren't just sitting on the sidelines. You were getting in there and then trying to figure it out. All right.
Yep.
What would you say was the hardest part, in the beginning to get that momentum?
Probably the time factor, because there's so much. I think when I look back, I was like listening to things on cassette tapes on how to actually learn my scripts, learn the business, learn the contract, and then prospect, and then understand that there aren't going to be people that say yes right away.
Right. Dealing with that rejection piece, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. How did it break down as you started gaining your traction, you gaining momentum? Let's take the year where you said you did 250. How would that break up in terms of listings sold versus buyer sales?
So it was all sellers. It was during the REO days, because 2011, 10 and 11, and I got into it late in the game. But I looked at the market, my Arizona market, and go, where are all the new listings coming from? Where are all the sales coming from? And during that time, you got to learn trends. And you're like, okay, if most of our top agents, again, look, I looked at top agents in our marketplace, if most of them had REO accounts, what's the path to getting REO accounts? Right. And so that's where I decided, okay, I've got to have a clear plan of how I'm going to get into these REO accounts.
So really what I'm hearing from you in both scenarios, in both markets, is you were very intentional in both places. This wasn't just you just throwing spaghetti at a wall. You were looking at what was working in each place, and then you attacked it. So you did some research first, and then you went after it. The other thing that I would just want to share this, because this might be helpful for the audience, is please. Before I actually took my corporate job as a team leader, is I wanted to jump on a team because I didn't know the market in Arizona. And even when I left my corporate role, I actually interviewed with real estate teams, because I'm like, how can I get the fastest paycheck in a new market? Is either I jump on a team or I understand what top producers are doing again. And by interviewing, you can do both, right? You can learn and put yourself in a great position. That's really important. How did you schedule your time? Back then, if you could put yourself back in that place when you were, again, getting traction, going after those REOs, how did you schedule your day? What did your day look like?
So I didn't know any different. I went to class. I think it was like boot camp startup for real estate agents at our brokerage. Sure. And they just basically told us, this is what a perfect day looks like. And I'm like, okay, if that's what a perfect day looks like, I role play at 7:00 in the morning. I start on the phones at 8:30. I prospect from 9 to 12. I mean, I still remember it as clear as day. I take a lunch, and then I do admin work, and I do all of my listings or buyer appointments. And if I don't have an appointment, I'm going to do an open house. Right. Yeah. And then the same thing happens again.
Yeah. And so you really fell into that schedule. I feel like, obviously that's so important to get those consistency and routine and habits. I feel like newer agents, this is where they have trouble. Like you just broke that out clear as day. And I don't even know how many years ago, it was a long time ago, whatever it was. Right. And you just remember it clear as day because it was so ingrained in what you were doing that you can just pull it like that. I feel newer agents, this is probably the biggest sticking point, sticking to their schedule consistently, right? Because that consistency is what creates the momentum that I think everyone's looking for. What advice would you have for someone who's struggling with that consistency of the schedule?
Consistency is hard, right? And there's going to be times like I just got off like getting sick, right? So there's going to be
Yep.
times where you're not going to be consistent, but you have to understand how to get back. And so because I knew that I needed to be consistent in the beginning, if I really, really, your why has to be so strong that like you really wanted to build this business. Guess what I did is that I had partners that met with me Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So like I was role playing with a different person and
Mm.
somebody better than me because I knew that I couldn't let them down. But I will always let myself down. It's no different than why I have coaches today, is because consistency is really, really hard. And I think that's the biggest thing I see, especially with so much distraction with social media today, is that newer agents or agents just in general, especially when the market is down, is they're testing so many things, but they don't test it long enough for the consistency factor of what actually works in their business.
That's so good. Having that accountability is so strong. I like what you said about not only having the accountability, but in a perfect world, if you can have accountability with someone who's doing more than you or better than you, that's the best, because you know they're not going to let you off the hook. Like if your
Yeah.
accountability partner is someone that's just going to let you off the hook, there's almost no purpose of it. So I really
Yeah.
like what you said.
It's really why like I like encourage people to start getting into the rooms that really inspire you, that actually have bigger players where you're the small fish. Because if you're the biggest fish, then you stop growing, and you almost see it, because I see trends all the time with different producers, and we coach a lot of them throughout the country, is they're constantly getting into rooms even if they don't fit in.
Getting uncomfortable, because that's how we
Yep.
grow, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So the consistency is one piece. You touched on it a little bit before. Real estate's a business that requires dealing with a lot of rejection, right? If you're going to do it at a high level, you're going to get rejected at a lot, right? Deals fall apart. People don't tell us the truth. It's hard. So what helped you keep moving forward during these periods of we're getting told more than yes? What helps you get through those periods of time?
I think you have to first deal with it and say that it's really has nothing to do with how you're going to be successful or not. It's you have to actually walk past it. And I learned that from a top agent when I first got in the business, because he was constantly getting rejected. I said, if he's getting rejected and he's one of my mentors, then I'm definitely going to get rejected. So I took it as it's a part of success, and it still is a part of success in all the ventures that I've ever done. Is rejection is always going to be there. So you just get better over time as you deal with more of it. And remember, like rejection, they say, is redirection for a bigger opportunity.
I like that. So what you're telling us is the rejection never goes away. You can't get away. You just have to accept it as part of the process.
Yeah. I mean, how long have I been in the business and we still get rejected today? How long have you been in the business? And there are times where you don't get a listing or you don't get the buyer. It's part of success. And when you realize that it's a recipe for success and it's part of it, then you deal with it and you just get better.
Yeah. Well said. So now I want to tap in or pivot a little bit to your team growing, right? We've talked a lot about you as a solo agent. Were there similar challenges when you started growing your team, that you found compared to when you were a solo agent, when you're trying to get the team off the ground?
Oh my gosh, there are similar and there are not so similar challenges.
Okay. Tell me more.
Similar in the way of like everything's new. Right?
Yep.
When you hire, you don't really know how to hire. Like the first person I hired was my cousin, and then it was a friend. I was like, you want to work? You want some hours? Here's my pay rate. And can you help me with paperwork? But like, I didn't have standards. I didn't have a clear role for them. So it is hard because you're learning not only how to navigate your own business, but you're navigating leadership, hiring, HR roles, accountability. Like, not only are you accountable to yourself, now you're accountable to a team, and now you're managing a team. And that's a totally different hat than, I would say, managing yourself.
That's a really important. You're accountable for more people than just yourself. Is there because I feel like a lot of people right now, a lot of successful agents are on the fence. Do I start a team? Do I stay solo? Is there one that you say is harder than the other, or is it just different?
It's just different. And it also depends on your personality. If you like being around people, you like impacting people, you like teaching people, you like holding people accountable, and you're willing to have, so I think the most successful team leaders are willing to have the tough conversations in business. And it's not always easy, because I was just talking to a friend yesterday, is like, I found out that I have an employee that's lying. And so, you have different things that you come up with when you're running a business and you're running a team versus when you're a solo agent.
Mm.
There's always something.
Right. That accountability piece is critical. And if you're not willing to do that, then maybe it's best to stay solo, or vice versa. If that is your thing, then that's aligned, right?
Yeah, I think today, as I look at all the different trends and all the different models, there's so many different models that you can get there in so many different ways. There's not a one way fits all for building a successful real estate business. You could be a solo agent and still build $1 million business. You just may have to have different points of leverage in your business, whether it's systems, whether it's automation, whether it's showing agents, whatever it is. There's so many different ways. So like I said, you just have to figure out, what do you want your world to look like, or your business to look like, or your lifestyle to look like? And let's work backwards.
And that could be a pro or a con, right? Because sometimes if we have too many choices, right, it's hard to even take a step, right? But you're right. There are so many right ways, just real estate in general, right? So many right ways to do it, whether it's just investing or an agent or a team or commercial. There's so many avenues. So I think that's a really good point that you shared. From your experience as team leader, you have a lot of agents under you. You've seen over the years. Have you noticed any trends in terms of the agents who actually make it and keep growing versus the ones that tend to fade out?
So when I took this corporate job of hiring agent, I didn't know how much I had to hire. So that brokerage, I had 300 agents. And I say that was the best learning experience, because that's the biggest mega team that you could ever lead. Right. And
Right.
so when I figured out, when we were hiring, I never got it right I usually would do the interview and they are going to make it. They're so going to make it. They show up, they're going to make it. And then they start to fade off, or a rejection hits, and then they lose interest. And then so over time, is there something similar? First of all, I don't think you can always tell. You can always tell probably within 30 days because of their action. Yeah. So the ones that I see make it in the business take action right away. They apply things right away. They're not afraid to make mistakes. They're super coachable, and they're always willing to pivot, but their goals are so focused that their goal stays always the same. The how may change and shift a little bit, but the goal is always the goal for them.
Mm-hmm. So action, it sounds like there's no, model person. It's more of the intangible. Are they willing to take action? Are they coachable? Having that straight arrow focus, it sounds like is really important.
Yep. Yeah. Because you got to be willing to do things that are uncomfortable, that you've never done if you've never been in real estate.
For sure. And it is hard to tell in the beginning, because up front, when people are just getting in, people can say the right things, but you actually have to feel that and see it. It's almost like a player in sports, right? They can practice really well, but then when you get in the game, how do they react under a little bit of pressure, right? It's almost a similar scenario in this business.
Yeah, sports and real estate, I think, are very, very similar for sure. Because like you said, that's a great example, is you could practice, but when it comes to game management or game pressure, how do you really perform?
Right. And that comes, and I think what a lot of agents miss is that comes, the best athletes, why are they the best in game situation? It's their preparation. It's how they practice when the game's not there. And it's really the same thing in this business. A lot of people just want it to happen when they're live, but they haven't put in the prep or the practice before they're in that live situation, right?
So true. So true.
All right. So let's take it to the next level now. Let's say you have someone who's productive. They're a productive agent. It seems to me a lot of these agents tend to fit in pockets, right? Whether they're doing 10 deals a year or 15 or 20 or whatever it is, everyone seems to have this comfort zone that, they're making it in the business, but they're just kind of treading water, so to speak, right? For someone, for the agents that you've seen grow consistently each year, have you seen any common threads between those agents that don't just settle for that mark? They're actually growing each year.
Yeah, first is the want. Do they want to actually grow? Because I think nowadays I'm seeing it more and more. Some people are okay with doing 10 deals a year and also balancing that with other priorities, or 15 deals or 20 deals. But for the ones that actually want to grow and that don't want to stay stagnant, the key thing that I see is probably mindset. I know it's really crazy, but some people think it's, oh my God, I did 20 deals, Raquel, and it was exhausting. How am I going to do it again? And I'll tell you that there's a book that describes this really, really well, which is 10x is easier than 2x. Sometimes it's not more hours. It's sometimes maybe tweaking a little bit of systems for you to actually grow. But do you want it? Because you'll find the solution when you want something really bad.
Makes a lot of sense. It's almost like motivation at some level, right? They have
It's
to want
mindset
that.
and motivation. Yeah.
They have to want to keep growing, because it's not gonna naturally happen. Like you said before, that rejection never goes away, right? So you have to be able to push through it.
And it gets harder as the market shifts. There's no 2 exact days that I've ever seen in real estate, ever. Like, it's never been exactly the same thing or the exact same transaction. So I think that even in this market, where it's a little bit more competitive in some markets, little inventory, it's a different way of prospecting, because now your pipeline has to be a lot bigger than normal in the later years of what we've just experienced.
Sure. Yeah. And I mean, that's a good thing. And that's part of what makes real estate so interesting, and then also so challenging at the same time, that no 2 days are alike. All right. So obviously it takes a team to sell 250 plus, manage 300 agents, right? At what point in your career, I mean, or how did you deal with being able to delegate and have people come on and help? Was that natural for you? Was that a learned process?
No, delegation. It's like, only I can do it. I was like, only I can do it. I do it the best. And anytime I gave it away to somebody, I was like, they screwed it up, and I get so mad. And I think it comes from my like upbringing with my father. Like, he's a military guy, and he's so short on patience. So I was like, I'll just take it back. It's so much easier for me to do it than for me to teach somebody to do it, and then they screw it up. But I quickly realized in leadership that, like, when we take it back, right, that we lose the opportunity of helping somebody grow, and we lose our minutes as well. So it's either we get really clear at like how I'm going to delegate this, what is required, what's the standard, and how am I actually going to check back to make sure. So I also do believe that when you're teaching somebody, and depending on their skill level, so if it was an assistant, let's say, for example, and you were delegated, if it's a brand new assistant going into real estate, which I did have for many, many years, you're going to take more time in teaching them, because it's going to multiply your time. But you also have to see that progression with that person so that you can coach and recorrect them. Now, if you're bringing somebody that's a little bit more experienced, right, you're going to pay a little bit more, but it might get you there faster.
Sure. That's a good point. What's really cool about that is, I think some people just think, oh, it's easy for them, right? It's easy for them to delegate. It just comes naturally, but that's not the case. A lot of people have that. I know I'm the same way, right? Where you feel like you can do it better yourself. And it's usually not true, by the way, but we have that thought in our head. But it sounds like for you really connected the dots and were able to look big picture as you were going through that process and understood.
No, I screwed up a bunch of times. So like you figure it out after you screw up. And I think that's like the beautiful thing about business and just in general is like the best business people like will figure it out, but they do it through experience. And I can tell you the best top producers are doing it through experiences, because they've screwed up sometime. They've figured out a process. And no different than our contract, right? We get more addendums because a lawsuit has happened. And then now you've got another addendum, or you've got a different paragraph. That's the same thing in business. So when you start to delegate, I would say, especially when you're giving off like your personal friends or your clients, that's really, really hard, because there's a relationship there. But I think is when you set the alignment of standards and you both agree, not one way, you both agree on the standards, then you have communication that kind of backs it up and where your checkpoints are.
Yeah. And that's what really creates a win-win and keeps everything aligned. So that's a good point. All right. Well, you've done a lot in a lot of different fields. Has everything, and I've talked to a lot of agents, so I know this question might seem silly, but I've talked to a lot of different agents, and they've all been different. Has everything just gone straight up year after year, or are there ups and downs, bad years, off years?
Yes.
Tell me about that.
1,000%. There's been off years. There's been slow years. There's been years where we've demolished a team. There's been years where we didn't make any money. There's years where Raquel gets paid the least because we had such high splits. Like
Yeah.
it's never like, I don't think success in business is linear and it goes straight up. It's
Right.
usually up and down, and then something gets figured out, and then you find this hockey stick.
Yeah. And I think that's more reality. Like, yes, every now and then you talk to someone that's just very methodical and they're 10%, 20% each year, but I think what you said is more real. And you have to go through those down times to learn and get to that next level. So what has been your way of dealing with that when, from a mindset perspective, because we both agree that's so important. You have that off year, that year where you demolish the team or it doesn't go well. How do you get ready for the next year?
Yeah, I just saw a meme, and when you were saying this, and I resonated it so well with it. It was like, today I feel like burning the boats, and I'm like, are you talking to me? I like responded to the person that posted that, and it's like, and it's the truth about entrepreneurship. It's like everyone thinks it looks sexy online, but there's a lot of things that happen behind the scenes. And even with the teams that I coach, a lot of people come to me and go, I want to be like this team, or I want to be like this person, I want to be
Right.
this production. But it's like, are you willing to actually withstand their expenses, their headaches, the things that they deal with on a day-to-day basis that they don't always share on social media? Because if you're ready for that and your bandwidth is ready for that, then let's go. But like, understand that there's big risk with some of those big teams as well. So how do we get over the times where it's like low years? First of all, my biggest advice is, just like in sports, when you go to Super Bowl, everyone has a practice plan, everyone has a game plan. But the moment they step on the Super Bowl, which I'm actually excited for in the next couple of weeks, right,
Yeah.
is they have huddles. They have actually 15 to 20 to some of them have 40 coaches that are coaching these NFL teams. And
Yeah.
people are looking at it from different perspectives, and they're constantly pivoting all the way to that fourth quarter and that last second, right? They never give up. And the best coaches actually manage. So my advice to everybody is like, just because you have an off year, I would say, don't use it as an off year. Actually pivot day by day, pivot week by week, adjust month by month, so that you can look back and made the adjustments way quicker than letting it ride the whole year.
Yeah. So don't just make a goal for the year, put it in a folder
And,
somewhere, and then check it at the end of the year, right? Like, you gotta
and go, oh,
let's
I screwed up.
yeah, let's track it, right? The more you track it, and the more you look and pivot and analyze,
You
the better.
move what you measure. Plain
Yeah,
and simple. Plain
yeah.
and simple.
You have to track something to be able to know where to pivot. So that's a good point. All right. So what keeps you motivated now? You've done a lot of success, a lot of different avenues. What keeps you motivated now?
I think the impact of giving back and sharing the knowledge. I once heard that knowledge is useless unless it's applied or shared with others. So
Mm.
I think that's what motivates me, is seeing other people grow, seeing like the Roberts grow, that didn't have a team and now have a team. I just get so excited for, them, seeing them to be able to grow and impact other people's lives and their own families' lives.
That's really cool. Because in the beginning of the conversation, you had said when you were that new agent, that's the first thing you did is you were looking at, who was doing it well and then trying to pick up from there. So, and that's how I learned best too when I first started, like finding out who was doing what and trying to mimic that. So it's great that we have people like you who want to give back, and it allows that younger generation to learn and grow, right?
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on balance in this business?
Yeah, I think balance is BS. To
Yeah.
be quite honest, I think you're in seasons. I mean, I was a working mom through this. Now my son is 18 and one is 13. I think you just have to understand that you're in season, and and balance means something totally different to everybody. But I have yet to meet somebody that has a balanced life and that's successful. They may be balanced after they reach success, but
Mhm.
going through this success journey and getting to success, I bet you their life wasn't balanced. So
Right.
I tend to think of, how can we make our life in harmony or integrate life? So how can I integrate my kids into not necessarily working in the business, but understanding that mom's chasing her goals, and in
Mhm.
turn it like helps them chase their goals too, and that
Mhm.
they continue to grow, because both of them are in sports. And so I think they
Sure.
see that, hey, my mom's going after her goals, or my dad's going after his, what they're passionate about. And
Yeah.
then I think actions speak louder than words, for sure.
Yeah. So that modeling piece is huge. So it's more about for you, alignment with your family, than
Yeah.
a certain time for this and it's getting everybody on the same page, right? On what you're working on.
Yeah, and we do schedule things. I know it sounds crazy, but we schedule date nights, we schedule family nights,
Yeah.
we schedule things because we measure. I learned from a mentor of mine who's like a successful billionaire that like there's things that you can measure to just know that for sure that you don't live life with regrets. And so I have priority circles and those go on my calendar first, right? But there's going to be days where I'm out on the road speaking and I'm not going to see my family. So, I think like where does the balance really come from? If I said yes to this, I'm saying no to everything else. So it's like, how do I incorporate and integrate everything so that it's in harmony for what I want?
Sure. That makes a lot of sense. Awesome. All right. We have time for maybe a few more. We're running out of time here, but I've really, enjoyed you taking this time with us. We all have our strengths and weaknesses.
Mm-hmm.
Are you the type of person that's like, I'm going all in on my strengths, or I'm going to focus on my weaknesses, or some combination of both?
I think it's a combination of both, and it grows as you start to grow. So in the beginning, it was like I'm going to try to do everything all at once. Then I quickly realized that hey, I need to focus on my strengths, and there are things in business that are your weakness. So like numbers, systems were not my strength in business when I first started, but I quickly realized after breaking my ankle and not being able to show properties for 6 months and having a book of business that I needed to get really good at systems. Or financials. I sucked at financials, and until somebody embezzled from me and that's why I'm really big on like when employees lie, I'm like, okay, I better learn how I'm going to do at least the basics of books and
It's
financials.
sometimes that life experience forces you to work, whether it's breaking your ankle and now you have to deal with it, or it forces you to get better at whatever it was that you may have been weak on, right?
Yeah, so you overcompensate. I also think it's like an athlete, right? Like they break something, they're overcompensating for something else. I think that's the same thing in business, right? And so I think today I'm a little bit more careful of like, I know my strengths and who could I actually hire, not at a beginner level, but at a, expert or mid-level or average or above average that can come into my world and expand the world, and we can do something really big together.
Love that. Because if you're just hiring someone that's just like you can't grow the same way.
Yeah.
Is that if you complement each other? That's a really good thought.
Yeah.
All right. So as we wrap up, what advice would you give to people watching who are stuck? Maybe they're stuck in a plateau. Maybe it's their business. Maybe it's their health or their life. It could be new, could be veteran. We all go through those periods. What advice would you give to someone to get unstuck?
Get in a room, get around people. You got to put yourself out there, or definitely hire a coach. Even in the very beginning of my career, my second year, I paid $1,000 for coaching, which I could not afford, but it was the best thing I ever did. And since then, I've never not had a coach, because I think they push you and they help you see your blind spots, and they'll tell you the truth of when they see the results when you talk to them. So I think like I believe in it so much, and it's why I love to give back and coach myself, coach so many people today, is because I believe in it so much.
Awesome. I love that. And it ties into, you've said it a few times in the call about accountability, and it's almost like it forces you to level up. So I love that. Well, what's the best way for people to connect with you if they have questions about you and your market or Play Bigger coaching? What's the best way for people to connect with you?
Yeah. I live on Instagram majority of the time, or like the team does, and it's Raquel Q. But if you do DM me, I will answer back. There's a LinkedIn with all the stuff that we offer, and then we also have a podcast for all of the new agents, or all the agents on all different levels, that I get to interview people like yourself, Robert, on the show, and we talk about all things business and life and playing bigger.
And I could attest to it. I've listened to the podcast, a bunch of episodes, so much value, so much information. So it's really helpful for those of you that are looking to learn and grow. We're out of time today. If anyone listening wants more information, you can send me a DM. You can shoot me an email at cthomesbyrobert@gmail.com. Our team is always looking to collaborate and happy to answer any questions. Thanks again, Raquel. I appreciate you being here today.
Thank you so much, Robert, for having me.
Awesome. Have a great weekend, everyone.